How's everybody doing? This is Seth Moore again coming to you here on Anchor by Spotify. We're coming back again today because we have additional information for you, and we're going to be sharing some things that we were talking about on yesterday concerning the current crisis in Israel and what is going on around the world. I want to begin by saying that there is quite a few things that I actually want to share with you, and chances are I'm not going to get to all of them, but I'll probably be spotting different things and I'll be saying different things so that you can get a general idea of where I'm going. And so I did a podcast about a year ago, and some of the things I'm going to be sharing with you are related to this podcast that actually is relevant now. And I listened to it last night, and I found it real intriguing that I was given this. And as I said before, because I don't really want to pat myself on the back or give myself any credit. And that is, I've always said that there is nothing new under the sun. So chances are, if I said something or if I did a podcast on something, as have many others, chances are it's been said before, it's been done before. Just because of those reasons, because we are really not the innovators of new things. We are more or less making things better, or we're tweaking things that have already been made, or we're adding new components to those things that have already been made. And we're probably, I'm guessing, making things better. So with that being said, give us a minute or so and we're going to jump into this, but we're going to be talking about the right to exist. And this is a podcast I did about a year ago. And I want to be reading some things to you. I was actually trying to upload the former podcast so I wouldn't have to do it, but I was having some issues doing it. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go forward with this. In this way, when I get an opportunity, I'll try to edit them and kind of bring them together. But it'll be primarily the same information. It's not going to be much different than what I'm going to give you in a moment. So stay with us. Okay, and we're back. Again, this is Seth Moore coming to you here in the Love State, where it is currently 57 cool degrees outside and it's cloudy. And you're listening to Scott Buckley, as always, here on Anchor by Spotify. So we're going to get right into this. And some of the things I'm going to say, I think that this particular area should have been addressed, and especially should have been addressed to us as a people long ago, and I'll make sense out of that once I get started and go along, and you'll get the idea of what I'm trying to say. Okay, so the right to exist. Now think about this. There has never been, as far as I know, and I shouldn't say never, but I have not seen, and I've said this before, I have not seen this be addressed by our government. I haven't seen it addressed by any legislative bodies, the Black Caucus, the NAACP, SNET, you name it. I have not seen it addressed in any trial proceedings or court proceedings in regards to, law, in regards to using it in case files where it can be used as a precedent to make change. And there's a reason for that. There is a legal reason for that. Okay, so what I want to begin and get started. The right to exist is said to be an attribute of nations, according to an essay by the 19th century French philosopher Ernest Rand. A state has the right to exist when individuals, now I want you to listen closely, when individuals are willing to sacrifice their own interests for the community it represents. And I mentioned this in the last podcast. Well, actually not in the last podcast, but as I mentioned earlier, a year or so ago. Unlike self-determination, the right to exist is an attribute of states rather than of peoples. It is not a right recognized in international law. The phrase has featured prominently in the Arab-Israel conflict since the 1950s. Now, let me say this. Last year when I was given this, because the Creator gave me this, He said, and He spoke to me, He said, the right to exist. And I was like, okay, what is that? What does that actually mean? And I can surmise from my own, thinking what I think it means. Okay. But when I was given to this, I immediately went and I began to do the research. I began to look it up, what it meant. And this is what I came upon. Now, it says here, as I just read, the right to exist is only self-evident when people are willing to sacrifice their own interests for the community it represents. Unlike self-determination. Now think about this. Black Lives Matter is self-determination. Civil rights is self-determination. Voting rights is self-determination. Okay? All of these things are self-determination, where people get together out of self-determination to want to change a thing. Okay? Now, it says, again, the attributes of nations, the right to exist is the attributes of nations, according to an essay by a 19th century French philosopher, okay? Now, it says that it only exists A state, rather, has the right to exist when individuals are willing to sacrifice their own interest for the community it represents. So, are those leaders, or those who's quote unquote who's supposed to be leaders, and those who are being governed by those individuals for their right to exist, are they being encouraged to sacrifice for the interests of their community that it represents? Unlike self-determination, as I mentioned, the right to exist is an attribute of states rather than of peoples. So therefore, it is the doing of the state. It is the people who pressure the state, who are willing to sacrifice certain things for the community it represents. So now I will say this. Now, during the bus boycott, that was an attribute of a right to exist, but it wasn't carried further. After the bus boycott, wherein people sacrificed and they were willing not to take the buses because of they didn't have the representation of the state. But when they boycotted and they shut the bus company down, then the state got involved. And what should have been done was to continue to apply pressure to the state. Okay? And if applied pressure for their right to exist by their sacrifice now to the state, things would have been a lot different. They would have been a lot different. This is the platform in which I would say that Martin should have ran on, rather than Voting Rights Act, because under this umbrella of your right to exist, or to get this right to exist legislated into law, all of those other things would have came under that umbrella of your right to exist, such as voting rights, such as human dignity, such as your right to housing, such as your right to gather, such as your right to, there wouldn't have been any such thing as integration. Well, let me put it this way, I'm sorry. Integration would have been normalized. It would have been normal. You wouldn't have had to fight for it because of your right to exist. Your right to exist would have fostered the legislative bodies to create a law for the people by their sacrifice. And it says here, I'll go on. Is an attribute of the states rather than of the peoples. It is not a right recognized in international law. The phrase has featured prominently in the Arab-Israel conflict since the 1950s. So this is why we see Israel today obliterating the Palestinians, because they do not recognize their right to exist. They don't have a right to, they have a right to exist, but it's not being recognized. Why is it not being recognized? Because there is not the right recognized in international law, which it should be. There should be an international law, a body politic that governs and says to put in the law people's right to exist, people's right to gather, people's right to live certain areas, people's right to vote, and as I mentioned, all of those things come under the umbrella of your right to exist. There needs to be international law of one's right to exist, because under that comes the human condition. Your right to exist is everything. If you don't have a right to exist, people could do anything to you, and this is the very reason. These are the very reasons why you see people being murdered in the street, people being slaughtered, people being mishandled, because there is not an international body law where it says that people have a right to exist. You follow me? The right to exist of a de facto state may be balanced against another state's right to territorial integrity. We talked about that as well. Proponents of the right to exist trace it back to the right of existence, said to be a fundamental right of states recognized by writers on an international law for hundreds of years. In 1737 through 1809, the phrase was used, right to exist, to refer to forms of government, arguing that the representative government has a right to exist, but that hereditary government does not. In 1823, Sir Walter Scott argued that for the right to exist in the Greek peoples, the Greeks were then revolting against Turkish rule. According to Turian's What is a Nation, 1882, so long as the moral consciousness called a nation gives proof of its strength by the sacrifices which demands the abdication of the individual to the advantage of the community, it is legitimate and has the right to exist. If doubts arise regarding its frontiers, consult the populations in the areas under dispute. Existence is not a historical right, but a daily plebiscite. Just as an individual's existence in a perpetual affirmation of life, Rian said. The phrase gained enormous usage in the reference to the breakup of the Ottoman Empire in 1918. If Turkey has a right to exist, and powers are very prompt to assert that she possesses an equally good right to defend herself against all attempts to imperil her political existence, wrote Eliakim and Robert Lintel in 1903. In many cases, a nation's right to exist is not questioned and is therefore not asserted. So think about this. Your right to exist. And let me just go over this again. This one area, and then we'll continue. So long, I'm reading this again, as this moral consciousness called a nation gives proof of its strength by the sacrifices which demand the abdication of the individual to the advantage of the community. It is legitimate and has the right to exist. Okay, so now, there is proof that there have been great sacrifices made by many peoples to abdicate their existence, and by that giving strength not only through the sacrifices of the community that have made those sacrifices, but it legitimizes its right and Therefore, it should be, I would say, it should be legislated that through those sacrifices of one's geographical population, whether it be a state, whether it be the country, that the people should use this as a means to legislate law and to use this as a barometer to demand that there be a lawful right to exist, and that each and every state should have, and not just, and when I say each and every state, I'm talking about here in the United States. But when it comes to countries, that each and every country's territorial sovereignty and territorial integrity should have the right to exist without any arbitration, without any legal precedents wherein people can come in and merely by force take away your right to exist. Because if in fact, if this is a lawful precedent nationally and internationally, because as you heard me read, it is not international law, which it should be. So therefore, this is why, think about this. This is why, when you see all of this chaos around the globe, and right now, we see Israel and the Palestinians at war, being backed by the U.S. in the tune of $5 billion a year. Where do you think Israel gets their weapons from? Because whether or not the Palestinians, and we can go on about Hamas and we can go back to 1973 when they had the war, 1967 when they had the war, and when how the 5 Arab states came against Israel. And I don't want to get into all that political stuff right now. But it is pretty political as it is. Okay. And how that they've had a peace agreement on several different occasions. One just lasted 6 months. If you go back when Anwar Sadat was the president of Egypt and so forth, and they came to the U.S. and signed peace treaties and so forth and so on. But if in fact these things were in place, would we be here today? Would we be seeing Israel doing what it's doing? We probably would. Because right now, the Gentiles are filling up their time for their end. It's the same old thing that's been going on for millennia. People coming in, not respecting people's territorial sovereignty, territorial integrity, and just planting a flag and saying, this is mine. I'm coming to take your... this has been going on forever. And this is what we have going on now. Okay. So we'll move on. So the right to exist, Armenia became known as the Armenian question during the Congress of Berlin in 1878. It would again be asked during the Armenian genocide in World War I. Okay, according to Besk nationalist Ukadi, the name of our country in our own language is the country of the Basques, with as such right to exist independently as a nation as Poland or Ireland. The Basques are a very ancient people. In 1947, listen, because this is where we are today. In 1947, a United Nations General Assembly resolution provided for the creation of an Arab state. Now, as we already know, the Arab people were for a two-party state. Israel, they ain't trying to have that, right? They're not trying to have it. They want it all. Okay? We had a brief interruption, and we're going to move on. Okay. My apologies. So we said here that in 1947, the United Nations General Assembly resolution provided for the creation of an Arab state and a Jewish state to exist within Palestine. And the United Nations partition plan for Palestine. The Jewish Agency, precursor to the Israeli government, agreed to the plan, but the Palestinians rejected it, and fighting broke out. After Israel 14 May 1948 unilateral declaration of independence, support from neighboring Arab states escalated in the 1947-1948 Civil War, mandatory Palestine into 1948 Arab-Israeli War. The legal and territorial status of Israel and Palestine is still hotly disputed in the region and within the international community. And it's not going to stop. It's really not going to stop, because for a lot of reasons that you guys already know, it talks about, prophecy and this, that, and the other has been written. And so these people are not going to let up, because they're actually by design being used by the Creator, okay? Until he's ready to just remove them. See, because this is actually what's going to happen. Okay? And it's just sad that there's so much carnage and people losing their lives. Okay, so I'm gonna be jumping around here. The Jewish Agency for Israel, formerly known as the Jewish Agency for Palestine, is the largest Jewish nonprofit organization in the world. It was established in 1929 as the operative branch of the World Zionist Organization, WZO. Okay. Now, what do you think about these people, Israel? Because these people. It says they exercise executive authority in the state of Israel. It consists of ministers who are chosen and led by the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Y'all know who he is. The composition of the government must be approved by a vote of confidence in Knesset. Under Israeli law, the Prime Minister may dismiss members. Okay, so according to Ian Pepe, Arab recognition of Israel's right to exist was part of folk. And this was a noble diplomat in the World War II. He negotiated the release of about 31,000 prisoners from German concentration camps, including 450 Danish Jews from this camp. that were released on April 19, what was it? I think it was 1941 or somewhere around there. And so these people were comprised because they were undergoing war factions within their country and under British rule, and there was so much that was taking place that they needed a homeland, and they looked in Africa first. Because again, let me be clear on something, as I had mentioned on yesterday, and that is that there is no Middle East. Middle East is a made-up word. It didn't come along until the 70s. That particular area right now that's being occupied is Northeast Africa, okay? The Bering Strait. If you go to Israel, you will see where it's separated, where they have the Gaza Strip separated from the lines that have been drawn by Israel, where they have the Palestinians quartered off. Okay, that particular area is Northeast Africa. Make no mistake about it. These people are invaders. They came in under the pretense of being the chosen of the Creator, which they're not. Okay, and through the Rockefeller Center and the British and the U.S., they set up a homeland for these European Khazars. That's what they are. They're Khazars. They call themselves Jews. Okay, they call themselves Jews. You don't see the word Jew in the Bible. Okay, you do see the word Israel, but you don't see the word Jew in the scriptures. It's a made-up word, Jewish. You could be an esh of anything. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying that to be pejorative, but it's true. It is these people who come in and take over. It's the same playbook that we've been dealing with for the last 400, 500 years through colonization of lands, people, and resources. Okay. The Arab states gave this as their reason to reject the plan. In the 1950s, UK MP Herbert Morrison cited then Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser as saying Israel is an artificial state, listen, which must disappear. The issue was described as a central one between Israel and the Arabs. After the June 1967 war, Egyptian spokesman Mohammed H.L. Zayat stated that Cairo had accepted Israel's right to exist since the signing of the Egyptian-Israeli armistice in 1949. He added that this did not imply recognition of Israel. In September, the Arab leaders adopted a hardline get my footing here, three-nose position in the Khartoum Resolution. And the Khartoum Resolution was on September 1967, was issued at the conclusion of the 1967 Arab League Summit, which was convened in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. In the wake of the Six-Day War, the resolution is famous for containing what became known as the three no's. No peace with Israel, no recognition of Israel, and no negotiations with Israel. But in November, Egypt accepted UN Security Council Resolution 242. Okay, and this resolution 242 was adopted unanimously by the UN Security Council on November 22nd, 1967. In the aftermath of the Six-Day War, it was adopted under Chapter 6 of the UN Charter. The resolution was sponsored by the British. Okay? See, they always got their hands in something, which implied acceptance of Israel's right to exist. At the same time, Nasser urged Yasser Arafat and other Palestinian leaders to reject the resolution. You must be our irresponsible arm, he said. And I quote, King Hassan of Jordan also acknowledged that Israel had a right to exist at that time. Meanwhile, Syria rejected the resolution 242, saying that it refers to Israel's right to exist and it ignores the right of the Palestinians, refugees, to return to their homes. So there was a lot of consternation because you have one of the backing of some Arab nations saying that Israel had a right to exist, but yet you never heard Israel saying that the Palestinians had a right to exist within their own homeland. So here it is. You have the backing of the British, the U.S., and other European nations backing a solidified state-sanctioned state for the Israeli people, which they want to call themselves. Because all of these people come from Poland, Russia, so forth, and all these European states to find a homeland. And of course, they did through the backing of these nations, these European nations. And you had others saying Syria rejected 242. But it ignores the right of the Palestinian refugees to return to their homes. How could you say that we have a right to exist, but you're ignoring the Palestinians after the war to return to their homes? Upon assuming the premiership in 1977, Menachem Begin spoke as follows. Our right to exist. Have you ever heard of such a thing? Would it enter the mind of the Briton or Frenchman, Belgian or Dutchman, Hungarian or Bulgarian, Russian or Armenian to request for its people's recognition of its right to exist? And the only reason, think about this, the only reason for this declaration is because when you come in and you take over somebody's territorial sovereignty, then there is a reason to put forth a demand for your right to exist. Mr. Speaker, from the Knesset of Israel, I say to the world, our very existence per se is our right to exist. And that is true. That is very true. And the fact that you would have to legislate it means that people do not respect your right to exist. As reported by the New York Times in 1988, Yasser Arafat declared that the Palestinians accepted United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 and as I just read, the resolution of 242, it was adopted unanimously by the UN Security Council on November 22nd, 1967. In the aftermath of the Six-Day War, it was adopted under Chapter 6 of the UN Charter. The resolution was sponsored by the British. Okay? And you know, they've colonized 2/3 of the world. So they had power, along with the US. But this is what happened. Okay, so when Yasser Arafat the Palestinians accepted, in 1988, when Yasser Arafat declared that the Palestinians accepted United Nations Security Council Resolution 242 and 338, okay, the three-line United Nations Security Council Resolution 338, adopted on October 22, 1973, called for a ceasefire in the Yom Kippur War in accordance with a joint proposal by the United States and the Soviet Union. The resolutions stipulated a ceasefire to take effect within 12 hours. Because what the Palestinians did during 1973, right during Yom Kippur, they attacked Israel. They caught them with their pants down. And they went because they were like, you know what, we're not accepting this. And they created and started another war during the 1973 when, of course, as I just read, they called for a ceasefire. Okay. So the PLO, after Yasser Arafat called for the acceptance of this resolution, in which Arafat declared that the PLO affirms that those articles of the Palestinian Covenant which deny Israel's right to exist and the provisions of the covenant which are inconsistent with the commitments excuse me, of this letter are now inoperative and no longer valid. So they had a difference of agreement, because they said that the covenant, which was denied by Israel's right to exist, and the provisions of the covenant, which are consistent with the commitments of this letter, are no longer inoperative and no longer valid. So at one point they had an agreement, but the time had ran out on that agreement because it was inconsistent with upon which they agreed upon. So, you know, you make a covenant and then within that covenant, you don't keep your word. And so in 2009, Prime Minister Ehud Mert, he said this, demanded that the Palestinian Authority's acceptance of Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state, which the Palestinians authorities rejected. Okay, and this guy, he was an Israeli politician and lawyer. He served as the 12th prime minister for Israel from 2006 to 2009. Before that, as a cabinet minister from 1988 to 1992, and from 2003 to 2006. Between his first and second stints as a cabinet member, he served as mayor. So there was given initial approval in May 2009 to a bill criminalizing the public denial of Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. They said it was a caricature characterization of Israel as a nation state and sovereign homeland of the Jewish people, with the penalty of up to a year in prison. In 2011, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, said in a speech to the Dutch parliament that of the land occupied in 1967. Said in the speech to parliament that the Palestinian people, recognize Israel's right to exist, and they hope the Israeli government will respond by recognizing the Palestinians' state on the borders of the land occupied in 1967. So, Israel's right to exist and wanted to be solidified within Parliament and within, this, I guess if you want to call it a legal precedence, that you have to do the same thing with the Palestinians. According to Mahmoud Abbas, said in his speech to the Dutch parliament that the Palestinian people recognize Israel's right to exist, and they hope the Israeli government, as read, will respond by recognizing the Palestinian state on the borders of the land occupied in 1967. You can't come in and say that we're not going to have a two-party state, because this is what is going on now. The Israelis do not want a two-party state. They want to they want to run out the Palestinians even from the Gaza Strip. They want it all. Israeli government ministers Naftali Bennett and Danny Dan he served as Israel's 17th permanent representative to the United Nations and currently served as chairman of the World Likud Danan. Danan previously, served as a member of Knesset from the Likud Party as Minister of Science, Technology, and Space, and have repeatedly rejected the creation of a Palestinian state. See what's going on here, y'all? We've been stating, I will do everything in my power to make sure they never get a state. Listen to this. He said he's going to do everything in his power to make sure that they never get a state. And isn't that what I just said a moment ago? Israel does not want a two-party state. They want to occupy the entire region for themselves. And if it means that they obliterate and missile and bomb the Palestinians from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip till they annihilate them totally, that's what they're going to do. And guess who's backing them? Great old U.S. of A. And it's amazing how we have billions of dollars for war, isn't it? How we can dig money out of our ass for war, right? Pardon the vernacular. But we can dig money out of the sky to create wars, billions. But they won't give up no reparations. They won't make the schools better. They won't create affordable housing. But you could pull billions out to kill people. This country's wicked, and these people are wicked. But retribution is at the door. He said he said he's going to do everything in his power. You heard me read that, right? He actually said, I want to read that one more again. Israeli government minister Naftali Bennett and Danny Danon have repeatedly rejected the creation of a Palestinian state. They don't want a two-party state. Forget about it. With Bennett stating, I will do everything in my power to make sure they never get a state. End of quote. In June 2016, a poll showed that only 4 out of 20 Israeli ministers accepted the state of Palestine's right to exist. Out of 20 Israeli ministers, only 4, it says, only 4 said we recognize their right to exist. The other 16 said ain't no way. Was that by design? I think it was. Okay. So Chomsky, he said, Noam Chomsky, he's an American professor and public intellectual known for his work in linguistics, political activism, and social criticism, sometimes called the father of modern linguistics. Chomsky is also a major figure in the analytic philosophy and one of the founders of the field of whatever he does. It doesn't give the entire description. Let's see. Okay, yes, technology and science. Okay, so that was his position. So we're going to read a bit more and we're going to be done. So John V. Whitbeck argued that the Israelis' insistence on their right to exist forces the Palestinians to provide a moral justification for their own suffering. They have to provide a moral justification for their own suffering. Isn't it something? And this was argued by the gentleman I just read about, Noam Chomsky, has argued that no state has the right to exist, that the concept was invented in the 1970s, and that Israel's right to exist cannot be accepted by the Palestinians. So he's saying that Israel doesn't have a right to exist, and that the Palestinians should not accept their right to exist because they're being totally ignored. And they have to prove and justify providing a moral justification for their own suffering. Think about that. So international law scholar Anthony Carty observed in 2013 that the question whether Israel has a legal right to exist might appear to be one of the most emotively charged in the vocabulary of international law and politics. It invokes immediately the exterminationist rhetoric of numerous Arab and Islamic politicians and ideologues, not least the present president of Iran, which hates Israel, as you should know. because he says he wants to get rid of Israel altogether, and it's Mohammad Bahani. On 28 October 1956, an Iranian principalist and a nationalist politician who served as the sixth president of Iran from 2005 to 2013. He is currently a member of the Expediency Discernment Council. He was known for his hard line. Yes, he certainly does not like Israel. So we're going to stop there for now. But we'll pick up on this, and we're going to ask you guys to continue to follow us. And it's crazy. It's crazy. But we'll see. But as we look, we see what's going on. Billions for the war with Russia and Ukraine. Billions spent on the support of Israel by the U.S. and other European nations. Billions for war, but not billions to do right by people. But billions to kill people. We got billions to slaughter people, but we don't have billions to build and to refurbish the bridges in our country and the water treatment systems where we got people dying, of poisoned water, in states in this country where we've had people who have to come in and invent water apparatuses so people can drink clean water. But yet we spend billions on war and degradation and murder and slaughtering people. These people are warmongers. That's what they've been doing since the beginning of time. That's what they do. They war, they kill, they slaughter, they maim. And you have to answer for all the carnage that you have created on this planet. And my friend, I would not want to be you. And I'm not you, thank the Creator. We have to do better. But the writing's on the wall. The next time we come with you guys, we are going to be talking about something more important, not something more important, but as important. We will continue with giving you this information, and we ask that you stay with us and continue to visit us and smash that button, subscribe, like, share, and we will continue to bring you this world news. Until next time, this is Step More coming to you again here on Anchor by Spotify. You're listening to Scott Buckley. We will see you the next time. Take care.